So imagine you're walking into this, like, foreign coffee shop,
Yeah.
and you've spent weeks practicing for this exact moment.
Oh, the pressure. I can feel it already.
Right, it's terrifying.
Yeah.
So you carefully string together the few vocabulary words you actually know, you step up to the counter, and you confidently order one coffee.
Okay. Sounds good so far.
Yeah, but then the barista nods, turns around, and hands you 5 coffees.
Oh,
Yeah,
no.
5. Now, I mean, most language learning apps would immediately flag that interaction as a massive failure, like a giant red X on the screen.
Definitely.
But the stack of sources we're unpacking today for our deep dive argues that your reaction to that exact awkward moment might actually be like the secret to unlocking the human brain.
It really is. And I mean, welcome to the deep dive, everyone. We are so glad you are here with us for this one.
Yes, welcome. And, we're talking about a curriculum designed specifically for beginner English, the A1 to A2 level. And it completely flips everything we assume about language learning right on its head.
It's a total inversion of how we usually think about acquiring knowledge. Because, I mean, think back to your own high school language classes, right?
Please don't make me.
Right. Do you remember that sheer panic when the teacher called on you to, like, conjugate a verb on the chalkboard?
Oh, the tight feeling in the chest, sweating bullets.
Exactly. And that panic is exactly the cognitive roadblock these sources are trying to dismantle. Because usually we think of language learning as this grueling process of, memorizing grammar charts and complex vocabulary.
Right. But this curriculum uses a completely different, honestly almost joyful formula. It's centered entirely on simplicity and human connection.
Which means moving away from the rigid mechanics and focusing on the psychology of the learner.
Yeah, reading through this style guide, it really reminded me of teaching someone how to ride a bike.
Oh, that's a good analogy.
Because if you want someone to succeed at riding a bike, you don't start them on some steep Rocky Mountain trail with a 21-speed gear system.
No, they'd crash immediately.
Exactly. You start them on a flat, smooth sidewalk with a tiny, single-speed bike and sturdy training wheels.
Right, you remove all the environmental hazards so they can just feel what it's like to move forward.
Yes. And this source material is basically the ultimate set of linguistic training wheels.
I love that.
So to understand how this actually works, we first have to look at what we're talking about when we practice. And the sources argue aggressively against textbooks.
Totally. They champion something they call the small story.
The small sword.
Yeah, and this deliberate pivot away from abstract rules to concrete everyday narratives is really the foundation of the whole method.
Right.
The core philosophy here states that people learn English better with stories because they're fun, they're easy to remember, and crucially, they focus on daily things.
Daily things. Not like philosophical debates.
No.
Not complex geopolitical news. We are talking about coffee. We're talking about friends. Or being late for a meeting.
Because when we engage with a story about daily life, especially a lighthearted one, we invariably laugh. Right.
And when people laugh, they feel relaxed. And that physiological relaxation is the absolute key to learning step by step.
Okay, so I'm looking at the coffee shop example here in the text, and I have to be honest. It seems almost like insultingly simple.
It does look very basic on the page.
Yeah, so it goes like this. One speaker says, I go to a coffee shop, and the other says, okay. What happens?
Yeah.
Then the first speaker says, I say, 1 coffee, please. The other replies, yes, that is normal.
Right, setting up the expectation.
Exactly. And then comes the punchline. But I get 5 coffees.
And instead of the character getting upset or, demanding a refund, what's the scripted reaction?
They say, big mistake. But then they say, I share with friends. And the text actually explicitly notes that they all laugh a lot.
They all laugh a lot.
Yeah. But here's my question. How does repeating a basic joke about getting 5 coffees actually rewire an adult's brain chemistry to learn a language?
Right.
Like better than sitting down and memorizing the verb to drink? Well, if we look at the cognitive science behind it, it really comes down to 2 things. Context and stress.
Okay, context and stress.
Right. So when you memorize a verb table, you have absolutely no context. The concept of to drink is just like floating in a dark void in your mind.
Yeah, it's just the word on a page.
Exactly. But in the coffee shop story, the word drink actually has a purpose. The brain anchors the vocabulary to a visual of the cafe, to the emotion of surprise, to the physical event of, holding 5 cups.
It gives the word a habitat to live in.
A habitat, yes. That's a perfect way to put it. But the second, and honestly probably the more important mechanism, is how this bypasses the brain's threat response.
The threat response.
Yeah. When a student is stressed, like when they're staring at a textbook, terrified of failing a test, the brain releases cortisol.
Oh, right. The stress hormone.
Exactly. And think of cortisol like a bouncer at the door of your memory. Its entire job is to block non-essential information so you can focus entirely on surviving the threat in front of you. So you literally cannot absorb new vocabulary because the bouncer won't let it in.
That is wild. So the anxiety of learning actually prevents the learning.
It physically blocks it. But a silly story about getting 5 coffees. That triggers laughter, and humor acts like a VIP pass.
Oh, I like that.
It tells the cortisol bouncer, hey, we're safe here, let the new vocabulary in.
Yeah.
The defenses drop.
So a relaxed brain just effortlessly absorbs the rhythm of the words because it's not wasting energy defending itself.
Exactly.
Okay, cortisol is a bouncer. Laughter is the VIP pass. That makes so much sense. But knowing that humor lowers cortisol doesn't really help if the learner doesn't understand the joke in the first place, right?
Right, which brings us to the actual engineering of these sentences.
Yeah, because looking at the style guide in our sources, this isn't just people chatting randomly. There is a very strict architecture of simplicity at play here.
It is heavily engineered to feel natural, which is sort of ironic.
It is. I mean, the constraints outlined in the style guide are intense. Sentences must be incredibly short. We are talking only 5 to 10 words per sentence.
Very short.
Yeah. And they must predominantly use the basic present tense. Plus, there is a mandate for heavy repetition of important words.
Right, like repeating funny story.
Yes. Why are these specific constraints so non-negotiable?
It all comes back to a concept called working memory.
Okay.
When you hear a new language, your brain isn't just passively listening. It's frantically decoding. It's trying to parse the foreign accent, translate the noun, figure out the verb tense, and guess the context all at the exact same time.
It's like juggling.
It's exactly like juggling, and a beginner's working memory can only juggle about 3 or 4 of those decoding tasks at a time.
Okay.
So if you hit them with a 20-word sentence full of complex clauses, the juggling balls just drop. The cognitive load completely overloads the system.
Oh, wow. So that they'll literally forget the beginning of the sentence by the time you reach the end.
Precisely. By capping sentences at 5 to 10 words in the basic present tense, you ensure the decoding process finishes before the working memory overloads.
You allow the listener to process the entire thought as a single manageable unit.
Yes.
Which totally explains the rules they have for pronunciation and word optimization, too.
Oh, absolutely.
Because the sources say you have to avoid idioms, slang, and difficult words entirely. You have to break ideas into small parts and use clear sounds, like you should use the word big instead of enormous,
right,
and say I am late instead of I am delayed.
That is a perfect example of optimizing for understanding over precision, because the word delayed or enormous might be more accurate in a literary sense, but for a beginner, they are roadblocks.
Because they add extra syllables.
Extra syllables, complex vowel sounds, all things the brain now has to juggle.
Right, and idioms would be even worse, I imagine.
Idioms are toxic for beginners. If you tell a beginner it's raining cats and dogs, you haven't just lost them, you have actively confused them.
They're literally picturing animals falling from the sky.
Exactly. The goal of this curriculum isn't to show off an expansive vocabulary. It's to keep the ball in the air.
Right. Well, I'm really glad you brought up vocabulary because the sources actually provide a foundational core vocabulary list for these small stories.
They do, yeah.
It's a highly targeted toolkit, just 10 words. But as I'm looking at this list, what strikes me is what's missing. Like, there is no bathroom. There's no hospital or money or taxi.
The typical tourist survival words?
Exactly, the phrasebook stuff. Instead, the 10 bedrock words they choose are completely different. Let me read a few of them.
Go for it.
First is story, which they define as a short talk about something that happened.
Uh-huh.
Then funny, which makes people laugh.
Uh-huh.
Problem, something not easy. Friend, a person you like. And talk, to speak with someone.
I mean, if you look at those first 5, they are entirely focused on human connection.
They are.
It really implies that the mechanism for survival in a new language isn't navigation, it's socialization.
Wow, yes. Let me read the other 5. So we have laugh, to make a happy sound. Mistake, something wrong. Coffee, a hot drink. Late, not on time.
Ah.
And finally, idea, a thought or plan.
Notice the narrative arc you can build with just those 10 words.
Oh, yeah.
They basically encapsulate the entire human social experience. You have a friend, you talk, you share an idea or a story,
Right.
you encounter a problem or make a mistake, like being late, and then you laugh about it over coffee.
It's all right there.
Yeah.
It honestly makes me think of cooking. Like this approach is like a master chef cooking a gourmet meal using only 5 extremely high-quality ingredients.
Mm-hmm.
Contrast that with an amateur staring at a massive 100-bottle spice rack, completely paralyzed trying to figure out what to use. Constraint breeds creativity, right?
It absolutely does. When you remove the pressure of finding the perfect complex word from that giant spice rack, both the teacher and the learner can focus entirely on the connection.
Yeah.
This limited vocabulary isn't a cage. It gives the learner immediate mastery over their environment.
Because they don't need 1,000 words to express a thought.
Right. They only need 10 reliable ones to keep the interaction alive.
Okay, so we have the humorous stories to keep cortisol low, and we have the strict 10-word structural engineering to protect the working memory. But the final piece of the puzzle here, and honestly, the part that challenges conventional wisdom the most, is the environment.
The psychology of the conversation itself.
Exactly. How do the speakers actually interact with each other? The sources provide a dialogue behavior guide for the hosts, and it reads more like a manual for radical empathy than a language textbook.
It really does. The text mandates that speakers must be kind, patient, and explicitly help each other understand.
Yeah.
They need to ask easy questions, explain when things aren't clear, and use very natural supportive reactions, like lots of saying, "Oh, really?" and "Wow."
Which feels so different from a classroom.
Well, those natural reactions serve a vital purpose. First, they model what authentic conversation actually sounds like, but more importantly, they provide immediate positive reinforcement.
Yeah.
When the learner manages to say, "I get 5 coffees," and the host genuinely reacts with, "Wow," it validates the effort.
It says, "I heard you."
Exactly. It signals to the learner, "I understood you, and what you just contributed to this conversation has value."
Okay, I have to jump in and push back here, though.
Okay, let's hear it.
Because I understand the empathy aspect, I really do. But I'm reading this dialogue behavior guide, and the sources explicitly state that speakers should, quote, not correct in a strict way.
Yes, that's a big one.
But wait, if a student says, "I goes to the store," and you just smile and say, "Wow," aren't you actively cementing bad grammar into their head? Like, how do they ever learn the right way if we never tell them they're wrong?
It is the most common concern any language teacher has, and logically, I mean, it makes sense.
Right, it feels counterintuitive.
It does, but we have to look at the difference between fluency, which is output generation, and accuracy, which is structural perfection. If we connect this back to the overarching goal of this specific curriculum, the rule of not strictly correcting makes perfect sense. The stated goal in the text is to help learners understand and enjoy, and to consistently support them.
But is that enjoyment coming at the expense of proper grammar?
In the very beginning stages, yes, absolutely.
Wait, really?
And it has to, because strict correction interrupts the cognitive flow and triggers that cortisol bouncer we talked about earlier.
Oh, the bouncer. Right.
Imagine you're trying to tell a funny story about dropping your coffee. You are using all your working memory just to keep the juggling balls in the air. And every 3 words, someone interrupts you to correct your verb tense. What happens?
Well, you drop the balls, you lose your
Awesome.
train of thought completely.
Worse, you lose the desire to speak at all. The conversation completely shuts down. The fear of making a mistake becomes greater than the desire to communicate.
So the fear of getting it wrong literally silences them.
Exactly. In early language acquisition, building confidence and keeping the learner talking is infinitely more valuable than grammatical perfection. The fluency of ideas comes first. The accuracy of the grammar will naturally follow later as they get more comfortable, drop their defenses, and simply hear more correct inputs over time.
So the goal isn't to build a perfect sentence on day 1. The goal is to build a confident speaker.
Precisely. You want a learner who is willing to say, "I make a big mistake," and then laugh about it with you, rather than a learner who sits in total silence because they're terrified of using the wrong preposition.
That is such a fascinating reframe of what it means to be a good student.
It changes everything.
It really does. So to distill all of this for you listening, mastering a language at the beginner level isn't about giant vocabularies. It's not about memorizing endless conjugation charts or, sounding like a university professor.
No, it's about simplifying the input so the brain can actually parse it without panic.
Yes, it is entirely about using the basic present tense, It's
Yep.
about short sentences of 5 to 10 words. It's about using clear sounds instead of confusing idioms.
Absolutely.
And most importantly, it's about creating a safe, supportive space to make mistakes,
Yeah.
like accidentally ordering 5 coffees and being able to just laugh about it with friends.
Because that's how we actually learn.
It's giving people those sturdy training wheels on a flat, smooth sidewalk so they can just enjoy the feeling of moving forward without the constant fear of falling off.
It is a beautifully humane approach to learning. It recognizes that before we're students, we're just people who want to connect and be understood.
Exactly. And that brings us to a final, lingering thought for you to ponder on your own.
Hmm.
We've just spent this entire deep dive analyzing how this highly supportive, simple, story-based approach is the absolute best way to learn a brand new language from scratch. But imagine if we applied these exact same rules. The endless patience, the simple vocabulary, the natural supportive reactions, and the rule of no strict correcting to how we communicate with each other in our own native languages.
Oh, wow. That's a huge thought.
Right. What would happen if we used this exact framework during a stressful argument with a partner? Or when we're training a brand new employee at work? Because if lowering the cognitive load and leading with empathy works this perfectly for a terrified beginner learning English, maybe it's just the best way for human beings to talk to each other, period.
It definitely changes how you think about your next conversation, that's for sure.
It really does. Well, thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Keep the training wheels on as long as you need, and we will see you next time.